Hey guys, welcome back to the lab. We're here with some more exclusive content. We're joined today by Marc, aka Cheats. Marc, how you doing today?
What's good, Leon, man? How are you? It's a pleasure to be here, my man.
I'm doing good. We're just living life. I'm really excited to get you here in the lab to kind of talk about your story a little bit and get to know you, and then hopefully create some magic.
Absolutely. No, I'm glad to be here, man. I see you're rocking the White Sox.
Yes,
White
sir.
Sox today, and on the field it's a little bit of a struggle, but hopefully things are looking up on the South Side.
Yeah, yeah. That's baseball wise, that's a terrible story. But yeah, we'll move on to cooler stuff. So, I was introduced to you a couple years ago. We haven't officially met other than this brief video call. So I wanted to just kind of get to know you and kind of let the fans kind of know who you are. So I was introduced to you when you interviewed um my I guess views from the vault co. I don't know what we call each other. I guess the colleague. Yeah. Jason Mead, the hat
Yeah,
crawler. You interviewed
yeah.
Jason in your other on your other platform. You've ended up starting another one. So let's kind of break it down. So you've been doing content creation for a long time. Kind of how did you get started with that?
Yeah, man. I mean, I started as a hip hop writer. So
Okay.
that's how it originally started for me. I was a freelance hip hop writer. I live in Richmond, Virginia, born and raised in Richmond, Virginia. And I was just writing about hip hop and culture. And the cool part about that was fashion played such a big part in that. I've always been a baseball fan, lifelong baseball fan. But when you're writing about hip hop and culture, then you branch into sneakers, then you branch into hats, and you branch into all kinds of cool things. And I ran across all the stuff that you guys were doing, like you said, I want to say kind of near the beginning when Views of the Vault first broke. Um, the stuff that you were talking about and designing, and the groups that was kind of forming through social media. And for me, as a hip hop older hip hop guy, it felt like something was happening. It felt like you're going back to the blog era, if you will, of hip hop, and in the early days of like Nike Talk, and like people were really talking about hats and getting into kind of how things are really made and broken down. And you guys were doing, it's still to this day, it still does such a great job of talking about kind of what's released and what's it look like. And there was nothing real superficial about it. So I reached out to Jason because I was a big fan of Hat Crawler, and kind of I learned so much, not just what hats look like, but where to find them. There was another thing about we didn't know where to find some of this stuff. And I had a great conversation with him, and just kind of learned about what he was doing with Hat Crawler, and then in turn became a big follower of your designs. And I've got several Leon in the Lab hats, several.
Appreciate you. Yeah.
And it was just awesome, man. It was just awesome to see what you guys were doing. But that's how it started for me with the content creation, was really hip hop writing, hip hop podcasting, and it kind of developed into what I'm doing now, which is really a podcast and platform dedicated to baseball and black baseball players and black baseball culture in the game. And that's been going for about 2 years, and it's really going well. The Black Baseball Mixtape is what it's called.
Awesome. What inspired you to create the Black Baseball Mixtape podcast?
Need. I think the
Yeah.
best part of it is need, right? And when I say that, I really mean almost a holistic approach of black culture in the game, whether it's the players. Everybody reads the stories about the lack of African Americans in Major League Baseball. Some of that stuff is starting to turn around, but we were down opening days the last couple of years to 6, 7, 8% of African American players, where in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, you're looking 19, 20% of black players. And it felt like that era, we were getting further removed from the Barry Bonds, Ken Griffey Juniors, Derek Jeter was kind of like the last of the Mohicans in a way for our young black players. And so you're looking at why this is happening. And yes, there is a actual rise in interest amongst young people in basketball and in soccer and football to an extent, depending on what region you are. But there was also other things, I think, that baseball in many ways kind of turned away, if you will, from inner cities, turned away from urban areas, became more of a country club travel ball sport, which priced a lot of kids out of the game. So you're looking at all of this, and you're also looking at TV, and you're looking at media, and you're seeing all of the media content that's really taken off. And it's all football, it's all basketball. It's some global soccer in there, if you will. And baseball just really was just behind, and still is in many ways behind in trying to get what gets our kids excited. But that's why it was so important for me to, as one person trying to like make it more cool, culturally acceptable, and so forth in my small little way, in my small little wing. And it really became a passion that I didn't know. It's like one of those things you didn't know you needed. But now it's really become a mission to teach people about some really cool things, not just in the major league level, but minor league, college, little league. There's so many cool things that are happening with black culture in baseball, and hats play a role in that. And the rise of kind of Negro League interest has played an interest in that. And we talked about people getting more interested in players like Jackie Robinson and Willie Mays, and even, like I said, if our Afro-Latino brothers, Roberto Clemente. So there's ways to entertain with the players that are playing on the field now. There are ways to educate, teach us about history, and there's ways of all these other things, whether it's the hats we make or the clothes we wear, to kind of really put that in culture as well. And we're trying to do it all.
Yeah, I really appreciate that movement and kind of how you take that storytelling and kind of just spread the love of the game, because it's really hard, man. You see MLB struggle with it. They've modified the rules to try to make it more engaging, and there's an argument of whether or not that's doing its job, and negatively or
I love
positively
it, by the way.
Yeah.
I love the faster games, man. I love the pitch clock. I love more stolen bases. There's a lot to the rule changes that I like.
I do like it. I was just at a game on Sunday though, with my good friend TJ. He was in from Chicago, and the problem is you get to spend less time at the stadium now. We looked up and we're like, holy shit, it's the eighth inning. We're like, it's only been 2 hours.
Right.
Especially if you have like a pitcher like duel, like I think there's only 5 runs scored the whole game, and
man,
I 3 of them. So
it's quick, man. Some of those I know bar sales are still. They were talking about that last season where it was like, if you go last call in the 8th inning, you only might get you better get 2 at the time. You might not get that second trip off.
Yeah. Can you share a bit of history and kind of what you think the significance of black baseball in America, and kind of the importance of kind of just extending that and spreading it to the next generation?
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. Because I think, and this is not my quote per se, because I steal this, I'm biting this, if you will, from Bob Kendrick, who runs the Negro League Museum out in Kansas City. He's a great man.
Yeah.
But he really believes, and I believe also, that Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier in 1947 was really the first silo, if you will, into American civil rights in regards to the civil rights movement. It was like the first step in the civil rights movement, because when you really look at it, the Montgomery bus boycotts didn't happen until the 50s. The Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act didn't happen until the 60s. Jackie is breaking the color barrier in 1947. So Branch Rickey and the Brooklyn Dodgers and all that. And then while it took some time for other teams to fully go, Robinson broke it in 47. Larry Doby came just a couple months after.
Yeah,
and that was in Cleveland. Right, he integrates Cleveland in the American League, and then you've got Hank Thompson, and you've got Monty Irvin, and you've got all of these players that are not only are they integrating their teams, but in many ways they're integrating the fandom, because now one of the big things that is a big challenge for us in 2024 is not just the lack of black players on the field, but there's a lack of black families in the stands, right? And so one of the things that I always tell folks was that both Cleveland and Brooklyn broke all kinds of attendance records when they integrated. I mean, because they had the color section sold out. And both of these places, Cleveland sold in Municipal Stadium, sold more fans than ever before. And I tell people, we knew that there was only one black player on the field. And so I say that to say you might have 2 or 3 in Pittsburgh or 4 in Washington, and you're telling me that's not enough for you to go to the game. When Jackie was out there by himself, we flooded the game. So I really think that as kind of baseball went in many ways, progress in America went in a lot of ways historically.
Yeah.
And, you know, that I think people overlook in a way, but I don't think if it wasn't for Jackie doing what he did and the players that followed Jackie, because you got to remember, of like, I looked at this at one point, but I was like, of the 15 players that integrated, I want to say like 13 of them are in the Hall of Fame, or at least 12 of them.
Yeah.
And what that did is, for lack of a better term, by those players performing and playing so well, we're talking Don Newcomb, we're talking Monty Irvin, it just made America be a little bit more accepting.
Yeah.
Especially in places where they weren't accepting before. Now and again, there wasn't a lot of teams in the South. There's a lot, but the plight of the Black American baseball player and the impact that it had on American society cannot be overstated, because baseball was the biggest sport in the country, and it gave a platform and an outlet for our community in many ways to be accepted and cheered for. And it was just one thing. Now, hindsight's 2020. There'll be people that will tell you today that integration not only destroyed the Negro Leagues, but destroyed a lot of, kind of other things that were black owned. Because as soon as you we didn't necessarily integrate into a fair system, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But, again, hindsight is what it is. Everybody at the time was very, very excited about the progress that Larry Doby, Jackie Robinson, Hank Thompson, Monty, or those early players were making. And one of the funniest stories, I don't think this is exactly to your point, but one of the funniest stories about integration, and I love this story, I tell it all the time. Jackie played for the Kansas City Monarchs. Branch Rickey from the Brooklyn Dodgers took Jackie in the middle of the night, stole him, didn't pay any compensation to the Monarchs, just basically said, get on a bus, we're going to sign you in Brooklyn, you're going to be in our system, and you're going to play for the Dodgers. Well, they wanted other players. There were other players. Jackie Robinson was very well documented, not the best player in the Negro Leagues at the time.
Yeah.
They really wanted a Monty Irvin from the New York Eagles. And Effie Manley was the owner of the team. And she was like, you've got to compensate me. You're not just giving up my best player for you to sign him without any compensation. So the reason, believe it or not, they were able to take Jackie in the middle of the night and put him in Brooklyn is because the Kansas City Monarchs is owned by a white guy. Did you know this?
I did not know.
So the Negro League Kansas City Monarchs, the famed Satchel Paige, Jackie Robinson, was owned by a white guy, Wilkerson. And Wilkerson was like making money, so much money off the Monarchs that he was like, yo, I can't be the white guy that says Jackie can't integrate. Like, I just can't do it. They would boycott me. They would boo because everybody wanted integration. So he was like, so he basically had to let Jackie go for free and couldn't say anything about it. Couldn't say any disparaging thing about it because he didn't want to lose his black audience. But Ricky kind of knew that. but they couldn't have done that to a black owner.
That's interesting.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
There's a lot of talk too. Yeah, like you mentioned that he wasn't the best player, but he was the best player for the role because of, college education, military. Like he had the guy that did it had to not react to some of the disgusting things that happened to him later.
And Jackie went to UCLA. He was used to being around people that obviously white people and people that didn't look like him, and he kind of Yep. No, there's a lot of that, but I don't know if that answers your question exactly, but
no, it does. It does. And you bring up Larry Doby too, and I think that's one of the unfortunate things in history where he doesn't get celebrated nearly enough. Not to say one gets celebrate too much. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying, in the same way we honor Jackie and Roberto Clemente, I feel like some of that shine.
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, I do think there's a distinct honor for being first.
Yep.
And Jackie was first. I think now in time, the sad part is that Larry Doby did pass before some of I think he won the Congressional Medal of Honor. I think he might be the one of him, Jackie, and Roberto might be the only 3 black players to ever win that honor. But he had passed by that time that had happened. So I do think that the legacy is starting to come around, and it's a great legacy. But I think that it's later. Like Jackie got a lot of, he passed early too, but he got to see a lot of kind of some of his work, and I don't think Larry Doby really ever got to see that. Funny enough, who got to see a lot of it because he lived a long time was Satchel Paige. Satchel Paige lived long enough where I don't think he fully got his credit as well, but he was he lived long enough where I think people kind of understood my legacy is this.
He even played most of it too, just the amount of time he played is insane, right? Yeah.
We really don't know how old he is. We don't know. There's no accurate birth certificate on Satchel Paige.
That's insane. For you though, what are some of the things you do to kind of research and select your topics and guests? Because you've had some pretty big guests for your stuff. So kudos to you, number one, for doing that and kind of how do you take me through your process for that?
So I'm a bit of a baseball historian to begin with. So I was obviously a lifelong baseball fan, lifelong Oriole fan, but I really, really love the game. And then when the Negro Leagues, when I don't know how old I was when I really started researching what the Negro Leagues were, who the players were, what they meant, what the teams were. But that was early on. That was way before I started any kind of media platform or podcast. I was very in tune with 2 things, the Negro Leagues and civil rights. And then to answer your question about when the media stuff and the Black Baseball Mixtape platform and the podcast, when all of that started, it really was just opportunity. I'd made a list. I guess I do recommend this. I don't know if I would recommend this for any host that wants to interview guests, but maybe you do recommend it. At the beginning of, I guess it was 2023, I had made a list. I'd written out a handwritten list of people that I wanted to interview. I didn't know half of them. I didn't know over half of them. I probably knew I don't know any of them, honestly. But I made a handwritten list, and it was probably about 25 to 30 names. And I wrote them down by hand. I screenshotted it, and I posted it on Instagram. And I said, these are the people I would love to interview one day on the Black Baseball Mixtape. And shout out to, I don't know if you're a big wrestling fan, but shout out to Cody Rose. Because when Cody went indie, he made a list of all the people he wanted to wrestle with. And it was a handwritten list, and he posted it on X, formerly known as Twitter. So I got the idea from Cody Rose. And instantly, I want to say 3 or 4 of the folks DM'd me back because I tagged them, which is also very gutsy at the time. But I tagged them. 3 or 4 of them DM'd me right away and was like, let's do it. Like,
Wow.
let's come. I'd love to come on and talk to you and tell my story. Blah blah blah. And that's really how it started. The ball got rolling, and your best promotion, if you will, for a show, for any type of media platform, is the experience that your guests have. And if your guests are like, yo, I had a great time, let me give you 3 or 4 other people that need to come on.
Yeah.
And so we kind of built some credibility within baseball and within Black baseball. And then that turned into a relationship with one of our first partners, which is the Players Alliance. The Players Alliance is a group of African American baseball players. The chair is Curtis Granderson, vice chair is CC Sabathia, Edwin Jackson. Original founding board member is D. Strange Gordon. So these guys formed basically their own, after 2020, formed their own nonprofit to help kind of get more Black kids into the game of baseball. I got looped in with I got linked up with the Players Alliance through interviewing Edwin. Edwin was the first Players Alliance board member I had on the show. But then Edwin was like, "Oh no, you got to get Curtis." And then Curtis turned into, "You got to get CC." And so we wind up getting a combination of just true legends of the game. Now, fast forward, we've had Andre Dawson, Hall of Famer, on the show. We've had Derek Jeter on the show. We've had current players, all Washington Nationals. Josiah Gray has been on the show. Will Benson's been on the show. And then we go young, man. We go college baseball coaches. We go, some of the best, if you will, double A, minor league, single A, double A players in the country. We get them on the show, and it all is kind of a work in progress, if you will. But the podcast is you kind of learning from, getting insights from tops in the game of Black baseball. Then we do other stuff that are a little bit more traditional social media too. We watch the playoffs live with our community. So we've got a free Discord group chat that has community members in it talking baseball every day. We're doing meetups now. So it's all of that, but it really just stems from a passion of, wanting to see more Black culture in the game and wanting to see it taught, right? Like, a lot of folks don't know, if you're a White Sox fan, up until last week, you didn't have a Black player on your team. They signed Tommy Pham as a free agent. And so, people need to know that Tommy Pham is like the only Black guy on the team, and this is why maybe you should root for him, or he played in the World Series last year. So that passion is really kind of grown, and I light up, Leon. I light up when I feel like we're teaching people something, or kind of highlighting something cool that somebody didn't know, and I light up when we start to see some of the players kind of really like the platform. It's not a tabloid. It's not a gotcha. It's not hardcore journalism. But what it is, it's just like a place where people can come and feel real comfortable and be themselves and talk about the game of baseball.
That's amazing, because I've caught a couple of your streams and stuff like that. You guys, when you talk baseball, you guys are going like real hard with the numbers, and you guys know your stuff. So I appreciate that. It's not ingenuine. It's not fake. It's not nothing. But
no, it's and a lot of people just were looking for that home. That's the interesting thing, and I know that you probably get a lot of that too, where it was like, man, I was looking for what you guys do with views, and I never had a platform up until you guys that really did it the way that I would have done it if I was doing it. And like, that's how I feel when I watch y'all show. I was like, man, if I was going to do a show, I'd want it to be that. And so when I get that, when people talk about baseball, I light up, man. I get excited about it.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, like, to be honest, like, there was never it was such a niche that like no one was doing lives like that. No one was talking about hats like that. So for us, it was just natural because there's an extension, pretty much, of a group chat. It was 4 members: TJ, Pierre, and our good friend Chris from LA. but TJ and Chris don't like the camera, so it ended up just being me and Pierre taking it to camera. But it's essentially that, like, we just talk cats all day long. We're crazy like that. But but yeah, also cool shout out to Edvin Jackson. I mean, this guy's like, if you're watching the show, he's probably played for your team. Immaculate,
Right?
great
He
God.
probably has. I think it's a record high 16.
Yeah. But yeah, that's awesome. In your opinion, though, what are some of the big challenges kind of facing Black baseball now? Whether you're talking about the community or even just the players.
So twofold. I think some of the challenge with the players currently playing in the game, and it's getting a lot better, is that baseball did not allow them to be themselves in many ways. Up until probably just like the last 2 years, you start to see more, not just the Black players, but like all players. Like young white players have swag too, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're not allowed to really like be themselves, express themselves, show emotion, because they were so worried that it was like, oh, I'm showing somebody up, or it's like all of the baseball kind of professional, act like you've been there before type stuff.
Yeah.
Well, if you noticed in other sports, and I always point to football, basketball, and soccer, because don't sleep on soccer. Like soccer's got a lot of swag, a lot of flair, a lot of individuality, right? They kind of just allowed these players to be themselves in these sports, and they start to get their identities. They start to get fans. You know what I mean? And so you're starting to see that now, and you're starting to see it a lot with a lot of Latino players like Ronald Acuna Jr., Julio Rodriguez, Fernando Tatis, Vlad Guerrero. You see them, like you see the cleats they have, right? You see the way that they're rocking, like, and that's what brings young fans to the game. So
100%.
the biggest challenge on the field is letting the young boys cook, basically. Let Jazz be Jazz, let Tim Anderson be Tim Anderson, let those guys cook. So they're doing a little bit more of that. So I think that helps because that brings fans in. On the kind of youth, the pipeline side, if you will, the pipeline side is much harder because it has really become a travel ball showcase sport. And that's disappointing because, your youth baseball is not the same, because if you get to a certain age, they're probably going to try to get you to go to travel ball. High school baseball is not the same because now and again, if you get to a certain age, the scouts are only going to certain places. Scouting, I hate to say it this way, even though the access has become more because you can see more things through the internet and through like digital and so forth, scouting in many ways has gotten a lot lazier. They don't go to, if you're in Canada, they don't go a lot of times to the Midwest or the Northeast. They're like a lot of the cold weather kind of places. You got to either go down south on a showcase camp or something like that to even be noticed. So I think there's a pipeline problem with a lot of our kids. I think there's a pricing problem with a lot of our kids. And I think community organizations, along with Major League Baseball, along with the Players Alliance, I think all of these guys are working very hard right now to present more opportunities to get more people developed into camps. There's a wonderful organization called Minority Baseball and Prospects, Minority Baseball, Minority Softball Prospects. They kind of do the scouting and identifying and host camps for college scouts to see all over the country. It's changing. I think we're starting to see it change, but I think for so long there was either a lack of a plan or a bad plan while the game kind of went away from urban areas, industrial, and not just urban. I think people kind of use that as a scapegoat, right? It didn't just go away from urban areas. It went away from industrial areas. It went away from a lot of places like I can't remember where Bob Feller's from, but it's either Iowa or Idaho or something. It went away from those. Yeah, it went away from those places too. It didn't just go away from the urban core cities. It went away from basically anything that wasn't suburban and affluent. And so, yeah, I think there was a bit of a talent drain all the way around while this stuff is happening. And hopefully we can start to get some of that stuff back. I don't think it'll ever be the same, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't think baseball ever, in my lifetime, I don't think baseball becomes the dominant sport in the U.S. ever again. Right now, it might. Football's got its own challenges, but yeah, I don't think it'll be like it used to be. But I think we can make the pipeline better.
I think there's a lot of things you covered there that I just kind of wanted to throw my 2 cents in. It's like, for sure, it's become an elite sport in terms of like the cost is just insane. Like it used to be, you could just play it outside for free, but like if you want to do it on a professional level, like you said, you got to do the travel stuff. So like I'm from Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
Yep.
If you want to be good, like there's just so little time for you to play it actually outside because of just the seasons. So they'll spend the winters, traveling to Georgia, Florida, wherever, but the cost is insane.
Yep.
It's just so high.
And you touch on it. We were talking a lot about the Negro Leagues as well. And we also have to understand that it's not just black players went down, right? So if you're talking about that percentage of 20% or so in the late 80s, early 90s, it wasn't just that black players went down. What also happened was Latino players went up, Asian players went up, all of these things, and what we have to understand is, again, this all goes back a little bit to what we were talking about earlier, kind of the unintended consequences of integration, right? So what happens is when we were talking about those early days, Jackie just gets plucked from the Kansas City Monarchs, or Monty or Larry Doby gets plucked, right, and gets put in. Well, after all of this settles, basically the black American player today is in the exact same system as the white American player. That's fine. Call that what it is. But what you have with international signees is a different system, much more kin to what the Negro leagues used to be. And even much so on steroids. And what I mean by that is, during the days of the Negro Leagues, Major League Baseball wasn't paying for the Negro Leagues to be developed, right? There was no Negro League Baseball Academy. No, they just picked the best players. MLB, every MLB team has an academy now. In in the Dominican, in Venezuela, and so forth. They pay money to identify kids and sign them at 17, 18 years old out of a system that is completely separate from the American draft system, right? So they're cheaper in many ways.
Yep.
They just have a different so that part is also very interesting about, like, the pool is different. So now what are you going to do? Are you going to take, the kid that gets personal training every day, that played on the travel ball circuit and gets tons of reps? Or are you going to take, like, maybe a guy that has raw talent, you know what I mean, but hasn't had any of those other kind of factors that go into their benefit? Well, no, you're going to take the more well-developed player. And that oftentimes boxes a lot of black youth out in certain ways. So there's so many layers to it, but I'm glad you brought that up, because the international signee in the academy system and so forth is something that, one, could never be done here in the United States, because it just wouldn't work. Like, even if the closest thing you do have it to an extent. The closest thing you have is when you look at these like IMG academies, right, in Florida. And it's like, yeah, they go to school, but they're really like professional sports players, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, those are all big factors in this.
Yeah, yeah. And the stuff you talked about, like the players and stuff like that, like, yeah, you see it kind of them releasing the grip on the stuff. Like, I mean, like a couple years ago, bat flipping wasn't even a thing, and like now you can do it, and the cleats, and then and just the individual swagger. I think like what baseball kind of and just inherently different as a sport compared to other sports is, like, in basketball, your best player can take 80% of the shots or touches the ball with a higher usage rate in baseball. You can't let Mike Trout bat 5 times in a row.
Nope.
I mean, you can't even really let him bat 5 games in a row because he usually gets injured. I mean, he just tore his ACL. So get better Trout. Get well soon.
No.
But you know what I mean though. Like it's
Yeah.
more like team above everything, and like the Angels had like 2 of the most electric players in our generation.
Yep.
And they
On the
haven't won
same
a
team.
single. Yeah, and haven't won a single playoff series with them. So I think like the MLB doesn't do a good job of kind of helping their stars, I guess. But that might be a product of just the sport itself. I don't know, but it is
That's
weird.
interesting. I agree with you. I think that's an interesting thing, and I think it might be still tied. Believe it or not, well, work with me here.
Mhm.
I think it still may be tied a little bit to the steroid era.
Okay.
Because if you go back to the steroid era, fair or unfair, you really had stars. That was the last time, like I said, outside of Derek Jeter in many ways, because Jeter was in New York, he won championships. It's kind of an anomaly. But, the Bonds, Griffey, Frank Thomas, McGuire, Sammy Sosa, they put a lot of investment into building, kind of those guys up as stars, and even maybe even to A-Rod. And the steroid thing just wiped a lot of them out. Not all of them, obviously, but a lot of them out to the point where I think it was hard to kind of build up star baseball stars after that, right? I think you're starting to see it now, but there are some factors in there. I also think that we underestimate, like, Shohei is a great example. Shohei could be like the biggest like outside of some soccer players. He could be like the biggest athlete on the planet. Like, maybe not as big as LeBron James, but when Shohei comes to your town, Shohei was just in Washington. The Dodgers played the Nats, and the Shohei effect is real. Like,
I went on Sunday.
It's a real thing.
Yeah, I was there on Sunday. It was my first game of the year.
It's so cool to see. That part is awesome, and I'm with you. I wish we had more. I wish we had more of that type of effect where it was just like undeniably like globally huge. But yeah, I think it's getting there. You bring up a good point though. I wonder if we had. There's definitely a lull in stardom post steroid era.
Well, I think a part of it too is how hard the game is. That like
so hard.
That like once you have enough like experience, like right now, I'm really enjoying watching Justin Turner play baseball. He's the oldest player in the league. If Joey Votto comes and gets called up, then they'll be 2 of the older players. But I think like part of what the steroid era did was extend those careers, like because like there's a natural drop off after you get to 34, 35, 36, whatever it is. So it's not only that steroids makes you play better baseball, it's the combination of having the skill and the experience to know where that extra power comes from. So I think that's part of the problem. Like, we have such an electric group of players right now. I'm thinking of like Ellie De La Cruz, O'Neill, what's his name? O'Neill.
O'Neill Cruz.
Yeah, O'Neill Cruz. From Pittsburgh.
You got Ellie O'Neill in Pittsburgh. Yep.
Yeah, there's like so many of these guys and whatever, but like that is all raw athleticism. Like there's like and it's amazing to watch, but like we don't know if like in like 7 years is Ellie going to be that fast still? Like, like. But no, I think like part of the steroid stuff.
I'll tell you too, and this is one of the things that really kind of convinced me that Black Baseball Mixtape was on the right track. It was Judge's. I guess it was last season. Judge's record-breaking AL season, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember, and this is, I think, highlights part of the problem that we have. Aaron Judge that year had hit over 30 home runs before the All-Star break. I mean, he was on a tear. and I think it hit 30 before the All-Star break. And I'm excited. All of my friends are geeked out that this guy's really making a run at this. In a contract year, it was just like this amazing thing. And I remember turning on kind of this ESPN during the day for either it was, Get Up or First Take or one of the shows, thinking naively that they were going to actually talk about Aaron Judge and like what he's doing and how we're all excited about this. And I'll never forget this. They opened the show with like Baker Mayfield. Again, this is not football season. This is off season. Judge has got 30 before the All-Star break. And they opened their A1 block of ESPN with like Baker Mayfield. I don't know. Who's going to be like a backup quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. And I just remember thinking, baseball's never going to get ahead because this is a big story. And it's a sports story. And Aaron Judge plays in New York. And he's a great dude in that sense. And they would rather start every show with like a backup quarterback story in the NFL because they knew it'd probably garner more conversation and attention. And that's when I realized like it's not just what these guys do on the field. Like we've got to talk about it in a way that makes it attractive. I think that's why, any sport, the reason why, like I said, every year they're like, oh, soccer's coming. The only time soccer Messi's done more for soccer in America. And, or the WNBA. Caitlin Clark maybe is a person that they're going to actually talk about, right? But we're not going to change the way we look at these things unless there's a lot of help from the media, and obviously the people are usually ahead of the media. So, but yeah, it's a big ship to turn around.
Yeah. Are there any particular players or teams you feel like deserve kind of more recognition in that sense? Like deserve
all of them, but I'm selfish, man. I'm an Orioles fan. We won over 100 games last year. So, I mean, I think people do like the Orioles. I think they're like kind of a young, scrappy team, right?
Yeah.
But I think all of them, like, I mean, we're both AL East followers, and at one point, I don't know if it's changed within the last week, but at one point there was no team in the AL East that was below 500. Like they were all very good, and so I think that's the wonderful thing. The wonderful thing about baseball is there's just so many stories intertwined in there. But I'm the Dodgers to me are league pass. Like they're MLB extra innings. If I'm not watching the Orioles, I'll watch the Dodgers because they're fun to watch.
Yeah.
The Marlins are horrible to watch, but I watch them because they have Tim Anderson and Nick Gordon and Jazz Chisholm and Josh Bell. They're one of the teams that has the most black players on it. I watch the Marlins. I hate watch the Yankees. I do. Like if the Yankees are playing, Soto hit one in Camden Yards today that I think was close to hitting the warehouse, 447 feet. So yeah, man, I just think that there's and you mentioned Cincinnati's fun to watch. Like they're just a fun team to watch. So, and then there's players. There's I hate to hear that Trout went down, but it's like if Trout's playing or somebody, if Mookie's playing, I want to see him. If certain pitchers are pitching, if Hunter Green's pitching, I want to see how hard he's throwing that day. So, I mean, there's so many great stories in baseball.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I think the best thing to do now is we should kind of end this portion of the show.
Yep.
And we'll air this portion first, and then we'll record again and build our hats. But at least we'll get this part out, and it's not gonna be tied to the production of anything. So, I really, really appreciate your time. Where can people kind of find your work and I get in touch with you?
Yeah, nah, man. Instagram is our kind of lead social media channel. So you can follow us at Black Baseball Mixtape on Instagram, and then there's blackbaseballmixtape.com. And if you're really interested, especially in kind of what the mission is and what we're doing, there is a Black Baseball Mixtape Discord group chat. It's absolutely free. You can join and talk baseball and culture and hip hop and all kinds of things in there all the time. So yep, everything Black Baseball Mixtape.
Awesome. All right, Cheats. Appreciate your time. And we'll end this episode here, and then we'll get to work on building some hats. So for Leon and Cheats, we out of here. Peace.
Brought to you by VFTV.